Hello and welcome to this Black Talk Radio News Commentary. My name, of course, is Scotty Reed, broadcasting from behind the enemy lines of USA Inc. Hey, it is Thanksgiving Day here in the United States. It's the last Thursday of the month of November. I think the official U.S. government designated holiday is now, the 4th Thursday of November. So that is Thanksgiving Day here in the United States. And you know, every Thanksgiving, every time we come upon the anniversary of a major event, or whether it's a holiday or whatnot, you know, social media never fails to recycle the same old hot takes about whatever it is people are participating in, celebrating in, observing, or what have you. And, you know, to a degree, I do get where some of these right-wingers be attacking what they have called wokeism, where people are pretending to be woke, which I find to be a faddish word that's only been in existence for maybe a few years, a few election cycles when Democrats started adopting it. This was a term that I think started out in the conscious community, and that's all woke means is I'm conscious of something. It's just another word or metaphor for the word or the term conscious, meaning I'm conscious of this, that, or the other. I'm conscious of cultural things. I'm conscious of national things. I'm cultural of just about anything. Okay, that's all it means. All right, and some people have, I guess, used the term to elitism, and practicing elitism and looking down their nose at other people. Oh, I'm woke, you not. You don't know this is wrong. You don't know about this information over here. And then when it comes to Thanksgiving, though, with the wokeisms that come across, I kind of find, you know, it to be ignorant and not really woke or conscious of the history of Thanksgiving and why different people celebrate it, not just here in the United States, but all over the world. African Americans, descendants of the victims of slavery, or descendants of free black people who were subjected to second-class citizenship, and this is even before the Civil War, but throughout the colonial history, you know, this oppression of black people, regardless of their status of free or enslaved. But, you know, Thanksgiving has been celebrated and observed in different parts of Africa. I think they even observe it in Australia, but that comes from the European traditions. It did not start here in the United States, as many of these people would suppose, but it actually started as both a secular and a religious observance on whatever day, whatever people you talking about, whatever nation you talking about, was observing a Thanksgiving, just being thankful. But it was mostly connected to the harvest. Meaning, you know, we there was a major shift in human civilization where they kind of got away from the hunter-gatherer, although, you know, you could say that about early colonial settlers and even the indigenous people that was already here. They were hunter-gatherers. The same about, you know, the people in Africa that became victims of slavery. They came from hunter-gatherer societies. But then, you know, around agriculture, once these civilizations shifted to agriculture and farming and domesticating animals, then these celebrations and giving thanks were centered around the harvest. After you have planted, you know, your crops, and then you harvest your crops, and then you have a bounty, hopefully if you had a good year, and people would celebrate that or recognize that and have these feasts and what have you. So, I mean, different, even in Japan, they celebrate Thanksgiving, and it is not for the reason that many people ascribe to the Pilgrims and what have you. So I'm just going to go through some information and also share a little bit about why African Americans deserve this culturally. And it doesn't matter that the U.S. government has designated a certain day. People were already celebrating Thanksgiving, maybe not on that day. And the only reason that people started observing it in the United States on today, the last Thursday. What is it? Yeah, I think it's the last Thursday, or it's the third Thursday. But anyway, start celebrating Thanksgiving on this day is because the federal government was giving their workers off, so then people could travel to be with family. Stuff they were already doing before it became a national holiday. And then that, once the federal government recognized it, then it just trickled down to employers, large employers giving their employees the day off, their labor force the day off, recognizing that this was already part of either their religious or cultural practices. And so everybody settled around this day, and now people are able to travel and visit their family members and what have you, and have these feasts in whether you want to call it a celebration, whether you want to call it an observance, it really doesn't matter, but they're giving thanks. But let's go across some of this information, because it just really, I'll be sometimes thinking to myself, and sometimes I'll express it out loud like I'm doing here, but people be thinking that they so woke or they so conscious, and you can tell they haven't studied, and they have a simplistic view of history. And even if we keep it right here in the United States, a lot of people is ignorant of this history, and they just simply either don't have time to read or have no interest in studying this history. But let's just, go through a couple of slides. All right, first just an entry that anybody could have looked up. Let me go back. Thanksgiving is a national holiday celebrated on various dates in the United States, Canada, Grenada, St. Lucia, and Liberia. Liberia is a colony, which is now a nation in Africa, that was established after the Civil War for the victims of slavery, African descended people who wanted to go back to Africa. Liberia was one of those colonies, and now it's a nation. And again, they're still practicing Thanksgiving because that's what their enslaved ancestors here in North America was observing it for various reasons, and we'll get into some of that. But it began, and it's also practiced in Japan right now. You can do your own research and find this information just like I did. But it began as a day of giving thanks and sacrifice for the blessing of the harvest and of the preceding year. Similarly named festival holidays occur in Germany and Japan. Thanksgiving is celebrated on the second Monday of October in Canada and on the fourth Thursday of November in the United States, and around the same part of the year in other places. Although Thanksgiving has historical roots in religious and cultural traditions, it has long been celebrated as a secular holiday as well. So what people have actually done is they've accepted the Pilgrim narrative as the reason why people are observing Thanksgiving. Okay, and you can't blame them because that's all that was really taught. But when we live in the information age and you have access to the internet, you could do all the research your heart desires, and you choose not to, but to circulate or recycle these simplistic views and these myths in attacking other people. That's really what you're doing, attacking their observance of this day. It's not only childish, but it's also ignorant when you learn the true history of Thanksgiving, and it didn't start with no pilgrims, and it's practiced more than by just European descended people. And it's normally tied to a harvest, but we're African Americans, we giving thanks for surviving a genocide. Not to say that, we have no sympathies for the genocide that was committed against indigenous First Nation people here in North America, but those sympathies don't extend, I'm speaking for myself, don't extend to those tribes on the East Coast that was participating in the enslavement of Africans, either do like the Cherokee enslaving Africans themselves. When you talk about the Trail of Tears, don't forget their African victims of slavery who they took with them on that Trail of Tears. Even, their racist practices of the Cherokee Nation towards those African descendant members of their tribe. Now they don't even want to give them membership. So what I'm saying is, you have hundreds of nations, indigenous nations, that have existed on this continent in the history of this continent. Hundreds of them, and all of them were not the same. You had to stop erasing their individual identities. Okay? You can't, in their individual histories, in their complicated relationships, or in individual relationships that they had with Europeans and African descendant people. Okay, some of these Indian tribes here on the East Coast were slavers themselves, and they also would help the Europeans hunt down any victims of slavery who tried to escape into, the wilderness, so to speak. Okay, now again, we can't have a simplistic view and view all Indian tribes as participating in our enslavement. You had the ones down there in Florida, I believe the Seminoles, who welcomed victims of slavery into their tribe, and then they fought the U.S. Army together, these blended community. So history is complicated. It's not simplistic, and when you use such ignorant thoughts, expressing ignorant thoughts on the internet, thinking you taking a dig at somebody because they observing a particular day, they just tells us something about you and your knowledge. So let's move on. I came across this article, What Was Thanksgiving Day Life for Enslaved People in America? Now it's talking specifically about North America. We know America also extends to Central and South America, but excerpt from that article, but what they agree, they're talking about historians, but what they agree on is that African Americans have since time immemorial welcome the tradition of Thanksgiving, including during slavery. Throughout black churches in antebellum America, pastors openly preached against slavery and the struggles of black people during Thanksgiving with hopes that their troubles would cease in the future. And not only just their hopes, but their actions in creating the Underground Railroad and creating this network of people that was helping victims escape slavery. What we're talking about is free Africans, Americans who were religious and spiritual, and they observed Thanksgiving, okay, for their harvest and all of that, and also to network, to set up a network that will help free thousands, untold number of victims of slavery. I heard some of them kept good records, but not all of them. We don't know how many victims that they helped. When you think about the Underground Railroad, you think mostly about Harriet Tubman, but you had Christians, black Christians like these people, who were helping to set up these stops and way stations for helping these victims to escape. So, that kind of goes into the mockery against African Americans for being Christians, because they want to make assumptions about why black people are Christians. Christianity is an African religion. Ethiopia has the oldest church in the world. Christianity was spread throughout Africa first by African traders who heard the story about Jesus and spread that throughout their travels. And then the Europeans later got a hold of it, and yes, there's all kind of perversions of what people call Christianity, but again, I digress. I want to get away from this. It also said field victims of slavery during Thanksgiving would hunt for wild game for their families and friends. Tiny feasts are often organized with enslaved women making pound cakes or cornmeal cakes to go along with the game. The game is the animals, probably deer, wild turkeys, whatever they could catch, according to one account. Some victims of slavery sometimes ate the leftovers from those who were enslaving them and what have you. So this is it is a cultural observance among African Americans that it was in part forced on them when you're talking about the enslaved people, but then also willingly observed by free African Americans who were part of the black churches, again, who were always fighting against slavery. They weren't docile. We had these people who want to create this image of black Christians during that time period as they're only Christians because their slavers made them Christians, and they was all docile and all that, and nothing could be further from the truth. Again, study to show thyself approved, a workman never needing correction. All right, instead of spouting all this ignorance about what you know not. It goes on to say, historians say that some enslaved men and women took advantage of Thanksgiving to escape as their enslavers were often far away from them during the celebrations. They used what was called passes granted to them by their enslavers to facilitate their escape and to delay the discovery of their escape. Those who had spouses, this is important right here, enslaved men and women who had spouses, children, and relatives who were enslaved by different slavers would request passes to travel and visit their families during Thanksgiving. In the process, some escaped. So when you think about African American families, some traveling hundreds of miles away to either come back to their ancestral lands, but get with their family to observe Thanksgiving. This is part of the tradition, and to the point when during the period of pre-1865 enslavement, they couldn't see their family members who were on these different plantations. And then also that gave them an opportunity again to network, you had an underground network, information being shared word through mouth. Again, facilitating the escape of victims of slavery. So my ancestors have always observed Thanksgiving, and so shall I. So I guess what I'm saying is, before you spew your ignorance and you want to say this is all about celebrating the genocide against indigenous people, if you're talking to me, an African American, it's about surviving genocide, racism, white supremacy, a very oppressive system that's oppressive to this day. Okay? And we have a lot to be thankful for, not because of anything anyone gave us, but because we prayed for these things and we put actions to our prayers and liberated ourselves to the degree that we can say people are liberated today under this system. All right, happy Thanksgiving if you celebrate it. If you don't, keep it to yourself. Don't nobody care about your cynical views. But with that said, peace and blessings to all.